Yeah, it looks good. Looks good. Ready? Welcome everybody to the Sports Wrap. Look, a golden M on a maroon backing. You got to tell them the story before we get started?
I can. There's several stories to go with that blanket, but my wife waited for Butch Larson's auction and warded off several other characters because she knew that her husband would want this blanket a lot. The second one was, I was in graduate school and I had to tell a story, and I'd heard a lot of stories about people that really didn't like football that much, and finally I brought Butch's blanket, and I stood up, and I didn't stood up, I sat down, put the blanket over my lap, and told them about Butch Larson and playing Bronco football and like that. And as the teacher said, there was not a dry eye in the house. So I know one thing, I've always been able to tell a story. And most of that, I mean, almost all of it was true.
I was going to say, how much of it was true?
Oh, yeah, most of it was true.
Yeah, you're a storyteller. There's no doubt about it. That's why we keep you going here, George.
Oh, I've got a couple of stories today too, because I'll tell you what happened, Tim. We run out of sports.
We have run out of sports to talk about, and that is something I never thought we would get to say as we tape this on Saturday afternoon. We're here in George's house that was built in 1917.
Yeah,
in front of the fireplace.
Yes. The story behind that is that we kind of got boosted out of the Muni there because they were all in young and boisterous and having a pretty good Saturday afternoon, and
many of the folks there are old timers, hockey
players. They were all kinds of them there,
and they were enjoying the afternoon. I think their hockey day was done, and they were out and enjoying some at the establishments, which is exactly what this is supposed to do: is infuse some cash into town. And they were doing that, and the rock and roll, as you mentioned, was playing, and it was kind of like, we need to find a quieter place,
spot,
a more somber place to match our mood, because without the sports to talk about, our show kind of loses its fill.
I'm watching writers and sportscasters and ESPNers. Where do we go next, say they, because they really don't know. This is unprecedented, and when people realize just what a cultural event, and it's not just sports, concerts, Broadway, Disney World and Disneyland. I mean, Disney World and Disneyland go down, you're in rough shape. And empty airports. This country is shutting right down, and and they're doing, I guess, what's necessary to stop this thing. But it has affected us. There's no doubt.
Yeah, it's crazy times with how fast it went, and I know that the Star Tribune, Jim Souhan, I don't know, I think it was on Tuesday, Wednesday, and that was just about the time that the NBA had put the barriers up so you couldn't get close enough to the players, and he basically wrote an entire article about the fact that, well, they were only doing this to make the media's job harder. Well, now, Jim, how do you feel?
No, I know.
How do you feel 4 days later when you don't have doodly squat to write about? We don't have doodly squat to talk about other than what has been, and then how long until we get something to talk about? Because I still think it's a fluid situation, George. I do. The Big Ten said the Gophers said we're shutting everything down. The Big Ten said we're shutting everything down, and then they retracted and said, well, let's reevaluate on April 6th and see.
Well, you see, and this is, I mean, you can react to a situation and then reconsider. Now, if you just go all in, like what's going to happen next week with our wrestling tournament. I mean, and it's just like you and I. We've been coaches and athletes. We know we're used to disappointing things, but you never saw this one coming.
No, when we decided when we heard that this wrestling thing was going to be at US Bank Stadium, I know that when the day the tickets came out, I made sure that I was in line, waiting to buy the tickets, and still didn't get very good tickets even at that. This was something that for basically the last year, ever since the NCAA wrestling got over 51 plus weeks ago, was on the calendar, was marked, was going to be one of the highlights of the March Madness that we live for and love for and do the things that we do. And then to have that all pulled away, and then to have everything else pulled away, it is curious times.
We're fearful. We don't know what's going to happen next. There are other events that could be canceled because of this, and events that are close to us. And there's just, we rely on, especially in northern Minnesota, events to keep us going during the wintertime. This is why we live in a small town and why all this is happening. And we like to think that we're immune from this situation, but in fact we are not.
No, somebody asked me this morning. I was working at the Old Timers hockey tournament, and they said to me, "Do you think track and field and baseball and softball are going to be canceled for the high school season?" And I said, "No, I don't believe so." And of course, I don't have anything to base that on other than the fact that what's different about baseball, softball, and track and field and golf than you do have, and I'm going to use basketball because hockey is very similar, but basketball is more of a bare hand on a bare skin on a face. You wipe the sweat out of your face and you grab the basketball and it gets passed to the next team. Hockey, you don't necessarily have where you're using the same equipment, the same implement, the sport implement to do things. So it's a little bit different. I don't see baseball, other than the baseball and the softball, being grabbed by the pitchers and the players. That is something that I think maybe by that time will be worked around. Track and field, you're in close proximity to people, but there's a lot of space out there. So, and
also keep in mind the NBA and the NHL are suspending their seasons. They haven't canceled it.
It's true.
What's happened, of course, and now we'll bring up some of these other finer points in a moment, but the NCAA relies on 85% of their operating revenue off of this basketball tournament. This basketball tournament, I swear to God, it's what holds this country together. There is, $350 million that were wagered just on the NCAAs last year. This is everybody, because it includes every region. Everybody's involved. Everybody has their team. You've got grandmas and people working in offices making their picks and following their brackets. Their brackets oftentimes are as good as basketball analysis, because when you got 64 teams, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's just mathematically it's not there, and so this really put a big. I watch this. And I'm gonna, Susan, how are your books? You got music. You're going to be fine, which is true. But right now, I'm kind of hurting. There is no doubt a withdrawal thing.
There's a withdrawal thing, no doubt about it on that. And we talk about the economic hit to the NCAA. What does CBS and ESPN and ABC? What do they do to fill these? To fill these things and
they're
fill
scrambling.
the time?
They're scrambling right now, and they really are. And it's early yet. And it's just like you can only write about the competition between the Lakers and the Clippers so many times, considering they're not playing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's an amazing thing. But I'll tell you, one time, this is way off my script. I knew a man. His name was Charlie Sheffel. He was an All-American from Oklahoma A&M, which is now Oklahoma State, and he was a basketball player and a baseball player. And on December 8th, he was playing for Coach Ida from Oklahoma A&M, all in the Hall of Fame, and he come over and told him, "You ROTC people are excused from today's practice. You're wanted at a meeting." They took the ROTC people. They let Charlie finish the year because they were playing in the NCAAs at the time,
sure,
and are coming close to it. And at the end of the season, the end of that quarter, he was shuffled off because he was an ROTC and made him an officer, and he was shuffled off to Springfield, Missouri. He said he's telling me how this whole thing just kind of overtakes you, and I think this is a lot like that.
Yeah, and I'm sure obviously World War II and some of these other events. We talked. A lot of people have mentioned 9/11. We've talked about 9/11 and how that altered our decision-making process when we were coaching 18 and a half years ago. There are events that happen, and this one has an effect. We think about it. There's really only one day out of the year, and that's the day after the All-Star game. Most times that there are no major sports going on in the United States, and now we're going to have a stretch.
We go through withdrawal when that happens.
And we're going to go through a stretch here of probably at least 30 days of things to talk about. But, it's something that I hope everybody understands. Of course, there's the widespread panic and the overbuying and all this other stuff, and we hope that something happens here in the middle. Hopefully in a couple of weeks we can reevaluate and say, hey, we overreacted, but it was a good overreaction.
It's a good overreaction,
and we move on. So let's talk about what happened last week, because we always talk about what happened last week, and of course the Big Ten wrestling was kind of number one on our radar.
It was, and of course it wasn't that long ago that we had the hockey tournament as well, and we wound up with like I told you, Warroad was going to win it, and who else did I pick? Whatever it was, wasn't it? And then we wound up with Hermantown thumping themselves through the title championship, and then Hill Murray pretty much doing it from the other end, and they had the same style. What they had was great big kids that can skate very fast.
Yeah, but like I said, for Hermantown, it didn't all pan out. It was Matamidi that came through and won their first championship. If you look at it on the shot chart and the physicality of the game, people might argue with me on that, but I felt like Hermantown basically dominated that game and ended up losing in overtime. And
Matamidi been building a program little by little over there, and it's the people down there were not at all surprised.
No, and I think they've been there. I think the number was 11. This was their 11th trip to the state tournament, and they finally won it. So you break through and get there. But the hockey tournament was. The Class A was 3 versus 4 in the championship game, and it was 3 versus 5 in the Double A. And I do want it, was that what it worked out? 3 versus 5. And I guess I just I want to go out there and let everybody know that I did pick the one upset. Number 4 St. Thomas beating number 1 St. Thomas, the unranked, St. Thomas beating number 1 Andover. So make sure when you're bad mouthing me for all the rest of my bad picks, remember I got that one right.
Bad mouthing comes easy in this game. But I do remember that young Langenbrunner, a name well familiar with North Crew up here, and he had a very good tournament. And he's a very fine hockey player. He's going to Harvard. And kudos to John and Jamie and all the crews from, because Jamie was born here in this town. I remember this. It didn't.
Some people still are bitter about that, I think.
They are, but you got to get over that.
You got to get over that. Things, so the Big Ten wrestling on Sunday.
I've been watching this Big Ten wrestling tournament for years and years and years. This year was an entire lip ripper. These guys went after each other, and it's just like, Spencer Lee. I tell you, they got Spencer Lee and you got Nick Lee. I tell you, they had everybody but Robert E. Lee on this tournament, and it's Spencer Lee worked his way out. He's an incredible counter wrestler, and the counter wrestler is the kind. When somebody goes in and they got a really deep something, you don't have anything. And Spencer turns it into a reversal, a takedown, or whatever it is. This is a knack. Coaches can't teach this. This is a matter of hips and flexibility. And Spencer Lee was amazing. That was 125. He was champ. 133. Sebastian Rivera from Northwestern. Sebastian Rivera. Nobody knows about him. Well, I know about him, and he's the guy that ruins everybody's championship run. So, but I have to say one thing about Spencer Lee. This was the first Big Ten championship he's won, and he's won 2 national championships, which shows you how tough the Big Ten is.
Yeah, for sure.
And then Luke Fletcher from Ohio State, a really, really tough kid. Not so much that he's so tough, but he beat 20-0 Nick Lee. from Penn State, and you know Penn State and Ohio State, they go after each other. The other guy that I watched was Pat Lugo. He lost to Sammy Sosa of Ohio State once this year. So Pat Lugo was 21. He beat Sasso.
That was only 1-0, if I remember.
It was only 1-0, and
and if correct me if I'm wrong.
No,
on this,
it was actually 2-0.
2-0.
Yeah.
Sasso had a chance to go down to start the third period, if I remember right. If I'm thinking about this 6 days ago, and he decided to stay up.
Stay up. He thought he could take him down.
Yeah, and I found that an interesting choice, and of course. Sasso was the kid that I said in the last show that I was expecting to watch because he could do so many things. But this is what they learned. What Lugo learned about him is you don't want to get into that kind of match where you're going after and whatever. He wrestled a smart match. He wrestled a different match. He got Sasso completely out of his realm. And if we could have had a chance to watch the NCAAs, it would have been interesting to find out if it would have come down to those two again in the championship or somewhere along the way, because I never did look at the seedings.
And that's going to happen.
Would have Sasso been able to counter what Lugo had done and find a way to reverse what Lugo had done to him? That's the part of the wrestling that I like, because now you get to see these kids who wrestle against each other multiple times, and you learn something about somebody. You use that against them, and it would have been fun to see what would have happened if they would have met in the NCAA.
The other one that was just an incredible match was Alex Marinelli and Vincenzo Joseph. What a great name, Vincenzo Joseph. That's at 165 pounds, and Marinelli wound up beating him 5-3. But you talk about wrestling and how do you counter? You're a counter wrestler. The first thing you do as a counter wrestler is you have an underhook from the other one arm and an overhook from the other. And and you get that underhook, and that's called a whizzer. It's amazing what you can do when you have control of that arm. And then you can pick up the arm like this, and you pull out the thing. That's a Russian tie, a Russian whizzer. Now that guy's going to go wherever you point him to. And so this is the kind of things that I was seeing. Great counter wrestler with this underhook. You threw that underhook in there, it had to hurt. It just really had to hurt. At 174 pounds, Mark Hall.
Apple Valley kid. I'm telling you right now, Tim, he might be the finest wrestler in America, and it's just he won the match with Michael Kinnan from Iowa, 8-5. But one of the keys to a good wrestling match is who gets the first takedown. And Mark Hall, he knows this. This kid's really a smart wrestler. He gets the first takedown, 2-0. Now, from this point on, his opponent has to come to him. And it's Mark Hall is extremely well coached. He is an incredible wrestler from the state of Minnesota that you'd ever want to see. And then I just not to rush by, but going to heavyweight. Gable Severson and Mason Parrish. Mason Parrish is he was there on a football scholarship, and he was 6'5", 300 pounds, and of course you got to trim down from that. Well, did he trim down or did he trim down? And he fills that singlet, and I think, Jesus, that's got to be tough to look across the mat. That being said, Severson buckled underneath those arms. He took control of that match, and I don't think that there was ever any doubt. You just could see the potential from Paris, but Severson, he had control, and he won 7-4. The one thing that you usually don't see out of a heavyweight, and this is, again, you watched 1,000 times the amount of wrestling that I've watched, but the hip work by Gable Steveson in that match, because Parrish was coming in to try to get to the legs, and he would get to one leg, but them hips, you don't usually see that kind of flexibility out of the big man. And Steveson was able to do that and stay out of trouble and stay within striking distance of a guy who's longer, taller than him, and he was able to stay in there. And the one time that he bulldogged him basically into the TV, into the scorer's bench.
Yeah. Drilled him.
My wife was upstairs. Eli was upstairs. I was in the basement watching it. I came flying out of the lazy boy, and I was screaming. And Eli comes down the stairs. What's going on? And I'm like, this was a move by a kid, and I call him a kid because he's only 19 or 20 years old. But this was a man move against another big person, and it was just kind of like, oh my.
When Stevenson, you look at him, his legs and his hips are so incredibly strong, and they fill it out. And then you work up to the upper body, and it does not get any weaker. The guy is just an incredible athlete. And after watching the state tournament, I'm going to say this: there's 2 or 3 others just like him coming along, and it's just weird. And they're young, 9th grade state champions, 220 pounds. I mean, it's exciting watching these kids.
And I like Stevenson with the haircut. He looked intimidating with the big hair, but he looks sleek and ready to rock and roll. And now that the NCAAs are gone, his sole focus, I'm sure, has gone towards the Olympics. And I can't wait. Well, I hope I can't wait because where are we going to be? I say this: the Olympics don't start for over 4 months. I would hope by then we've got a lot of this alleviated and we're ready to go.
A week from today, we would watch Stevenson in the heavyweight championship match against Mason Parrish. There's just no 2 ways about it. They're the 2 best in the country, and I enjoyed that match. I enjoyed that match a lot. I was screaming and shouting, and I ordinarily, I don't.
Yeah, you were up and you had the arms going. I know.
Yeah, sometimes you get a little bit twisted.
Were you disappointed, shocked, dismayed, whatever the word might be, that the Gophers ended up 8th overall in the Big Ten? That's the bottom half.
I actually was, and if you take a look at the NCAAs, there were 4 that were going to go at large, and there were 4 that were going to be seeded, and 8 people, especially 4 at large, which is basically for high school, that's the wrestleback position. So you have to work through 1 or 2 matches to get to your next match. Sometimes that pays off for the upper seeded wrestler. Sometimes no, especially when you're at that level, because there's some young kids that can go down there that could be seeded 8th or 9th and can come back and kick your tail. So it does happen. But yeah, I was a little bit surprised. I was Patrick McKee didn't wrestle. Mitch McKee and Skatskal, they lost, and but they lost for the 4th place finish, so they were almost in the finals. One of the things that I didn't have an opportunity was to see the 3rd and 4th and the 5th and 6th, because those guys could have just as well been in the championship round as any of them, and you see some tremendous wrestling in there, especially when the teams are close. Iowa dominated. There's no 2 ways that they dominated all year, and I mean, Cale Sanderson, he's going to come back just licking his chops. But right now, the Brown boys, they rule wrestling again, and Iowa, it's time that they were able to do that again.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate that you don't get a chance to hold up that trophy to proclaim yourself the top of the heap. I was with the men's hockey tournament, the Old Timers hockey tournament this morning. I was talking with Jack Melstrom, and he actually works at the at the Mankato Arena.
Okay,
driving Zamboni and doing that kind of stuff.
He could be a spare goalie then.
He could be a spare goalie, and he said. A guy standing a few feet away heard me say Mankato, and you could see his ears, whatever. He says, "Well, I'm from Mankato," and so him and Jack started talking, and he said, "What did you think of the Mavericks? They were going to take it," and I'm like, "Whoa! You forgetting about the Bulldogs, the 2-time defending champs?" He said, "You remember how they kicked their butts during the season?" And I said, "You're right about that." But I said, March and April is a different story. I said,
"It is.
You got to be playing your best hockey then, not in December or November."
Were you down at the St. Cloud games?
I was not. I did not go last week because my son had a hockey tournament. So
Yes, I knew he was going to get in the way.
Yeah,
but,
that son of a gun.
But they played very well, and they have a way of perking themselves up this time of year. Anyway, those are the things that could have been.
And here's the thing: the NCAA has already granted all spring athletes another year of eligibility if they'd like to come back and use that. So we're going to have these super seniors or whatever we're going to call them that'll be coming back and taking advantage. The winter sports, will they have the same option because they didn't get to go through the championship? So might we see a Hunter Shepard for the UMD Bulldogs? And I'll use him as the example because he's the senior, Nick Wolf, and these other guys. There's only 4 of them for UMD. Do you see these kids possibly get a chance because they got a chance to come back and play a possible 5th year? That's a very interesting dynamic. Who might choose to do that? Hunter Shepard, I do not believe, has been drafted by anybody, so could he go play whatever type of hockey, go overseas, try to work his way back into the NHL, or is it better for him to stay and take another year, start going to graduate school, and say, okay, I'll go and play another year? So we don't know if that's going to happen yet, but it's going to be very interesting to see how that all plays out, and we'll get to have the ifs and buts and all that other stuff.
Do you see Daniel Oturu playing in a Gopher uniform again?
I do.
All right.
He was named 3rd-team All-American by the Sporting News. I think it was where he ended up, which tells you that, quote-unquote, he's one of the top, 6, 8 forwards in the nation.
They said a second round choice.
He's a second-round choice. To me, okay, second-round choice, don't anybody get too crazy about this statement, but he's going to make millions.
If he's a first-round choice.
But if he waits 1 year, and he comes back for 1 more year, and he plays himself into a top 12, now we're talking millions, not just millions. We're talking millions. And I see Oturu, the thing is, could I get injured and lose out on all of it? Absolutely, it's a possibility. Could he be drafted in the 2nd round and work his way up and get a great contract the next time around? Absolutely. It's also possible that as a 2nd round pick, he could go to training camp and absolutely lay an egg, and he could find himself in the G League for a long time and never get a chance to do that, where he could go keep playing Big Ten basketball. And I'm not saying it's the greatest basketball in the world, but it's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
And it's a pretty good lesson. And to me, if I was his advisor, if I was his agent, I'd say you need to go back to school for 1 more year, because the payoff from, I'm going to use this number, I don't know where it's at, $8 million to possibly $40 million, I think is there. I really do believe that.
I liked his attitude when he talked about, I'm looking forward to playing Luka, and from Iowa, and he had that gleam in his eye. I like playing against the best. This is what I'd like to do. Well, people will be putting him as that standard. I like playing against Daniel Oturu because he is an incredible athlete, and I would hate to see him going for the bundle right now.
And of course, I do have to eat a little bit of crow this morning or this afternoon or whatever, because Richard Pitino was told that he is coming back next year after I said he should go, and I still believe he should go. Although he did have a funny. Did you see the after game interview on Wednesday when he had a funny actually? He had a funny. He was doing the post game interview, and they asked him, because that was going to be on Thursday and there was going to be no fans there, and he said, well, how do you feel about having to play in front of fans? He said, I coached at FIU for many years and we never had anybody come to the games. So he said, I'm perfectly fine with it. And I was kind of like, okay, your job is on the line, your butt is on the line, and you still can find a way to funny. And it just got announced just before we started the show. I picked up my phone, and Dad is going to get back in. He's leaving Europe.
He is.
And he's coming back. He's going to be the head coach at Iona.
Iona.
So
they've had a basketball tradition there for a while.
So Rick Pitino going to be back in the college ranks. You go into exile for a year or two, and then you get to come back.
That's all you got to do.
I believe that's how people forgive. I think they give you a year or two and you are forgiven. At least that seems.
Sue ran upstairs with the news that Rick Pitino was given another contract. I mean, she was that excited about it. It's.
Scary stuff. You just
Scary
never
stuff.
know. So, it was interesting. Like I said, am I fine with Patino coming back? Sure, I'm fine with it. But do you realize that his Big Ten record
Well, it's
is
awful.
48-82?
No, that's awful.
And I'm just like, and somebody said to me the other day, if Patino goes, Mashburn goes, and they mentioned what other name, they both go because they're only here because Patino is here. And I'm like, so you're saying that Patino's got one more year because Mashburn and this other kid will enroll and then they'll feel obligated to stay? I don't know. I just hope that they deserve better. They should have had a better fate this year because we talked about those 4 games. We've been talking about them over the last few weeks.
That was an entirely different deal.
They win those 4 games.
Yeah.
They were in the NCAA tournament. And everybody's saying, oh, they're a 9, 8, 9, 10. And then you get a chance to make a run. You never know.
The second half against Northwestern, they played as good a game as a second half game as I've seen them play. They were just really, really consistent on every aspect of the game.
Wednesday night, I drove down to Hibbing to watch the 7A semifinals. Nashwauk taking on Fond du Lac, and Northwoods taking on Ely. 2 very interesting games. And I'm sitting there during the game, and I picked up my phone, and I looked at it, and it said Northwestern 31, Minnesota 29 at half. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
No.
They're going to lose to Northwestern in the Big Ten tournament, and yes, he is going to get fired. And so 20, 25 minutes later, I pull out my phone and I look at it.
It was bombshell.
And they'd outscored them 40-16
they
in the second half at some point. And I'm like, they're up by 22 points. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense.
Marcus Card just kept on going. Kelscher kept on hitting his 3. And they actually sat Danny down for a while to give him rest because they knew that
they might have to play 5 in a row.
Yeah, and so that was the situation. But the boys were all having fun, and the second half, that's as good a second half as I've seen them play. It's
it may be what saved his job. I don't know.
What saved his job.
It's interesting. So, what else you got on that piece of paper?
Hey, you wouldn't believe. I'll tell you what. 1967. We're going to go back in a little bit of time. The Minnesota Gophers.
Wait a minute now. Let's put perspective on that for everybody.
52, 53 years.
Yeah, and guess what? Tim's not even that old. So
yeah, I was in 1967. I was still playing football, so that's that long ago.
Yeah.
Oh, this is regarding a defensive end that the University of Minnesota had, Bob Stein. He was from St. Louis Park. 2-time Big Ten champion, or 2-time first-team All-American, Big Ten All-American, and in 1967 he was an All-American, a first-team All-American. He was a kicker. He was just an incredible athlete, and so last week he was nominated for the College Football Hall of Fame. He will be the 19th Gopher to be there, and the first one since Sandy Stevens. Now, it's like, I hate to give you the benefit of my age, but I saw Sandy Stevens play football.
Yeah.
And you see Bob Stein. Bob Stein also, while he was playing, he got drafted at Kansas City, played in the 1970 game against the Vikings. So he's 21 years old when he played in that game.
Wow.
And so he was there for 8 years, got his law degree, started his own law office in Minneapolis, and was the CEO and founding president of the Timberwolves.
Huh.
I forgot that.
Wow.
And so, but he is he's been called out as one of Minnesota's greats, and I think he really, really was.
Wow.
A two-time first team Big Ten. That's tough to do.
It's good stuff.
And it was in 1967. It still is today. Let me see what. Yeah, that kind of takes care of that now. Sad story. Kind of sad story. It's a hockey story.
Okay.
When I was a little kid, I would listen.
You were a little kid?
I was. And I'd listen to Canadian radio. CFOB right across the way over there was the only radio station we have. On Friday nights, we would have Friday Night at the Fights. And we would listen to guys like Sugar Ray Robinson and Rocky Graziano and all the rest of these guys. And we'd listen to these guys. On Saturday night, it was Hockey Night in Canada via the radio.
Okay.
Now, at the time, Canada had two teams. They had Montreal and they had Toronto. Now, Montreal was the team to beat from 1956, 1955, they had 5 Stanley Cup champions. They had guys like Jean Beliveau. What a great name. Doug Harvey. You knew Doug Harvey was going to lay a lick on you. Boom Boom Geoffrion. How's that for a name? They had a goalie named Jacques Plante. And he was actually a legend and made history. Now the first line was the one wing was Maurice the Rocket Richard. The other wing was Dickie Moore, and at the center position was Henri Richard. This is the Rockets' little brother by 15 years.
Oh wow!
Quite a bit. And he was called, because he was 5'7", 160 pounds, he was called the Pocket Rocket. Altogether, these guys became the Flying Frenchmen and set Stanley Cup history. And so you sit down and say, how French were they? This is Henri. They had a guy. What the heck was the coach's name? Was Toe something or other. Toe Brackens, and he says, they asked him, they said, does Henri speak English? And he says, beats me, I don't even know if he speaks French. And because he was so quiet and everything, but meanwhile, he played until 1971 and set all kinds of goals, and he was just, I like these small hockey players. 5'7", 160 pounds, scoot around. You can't hit, even if you could. They're tough enough not to take your crap. Sure. But he died a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
And so he joined all these crowds, but it's like I'm reading the list. Boom Boom Geoffrion. If there's other Boom Booms out there, I kind of like to see him, because
meet him,
I remember him, and I know they called him Boom Boom for a reason. But anyway, that's my Henri Richard story, and it's one of those things when these old timers pass on, you sit around and think, do you just remember, Maurice Richard, and you could hear it, and it was a Canadian accent. That's where I picked up a Canadian accent. Was listening to
the hockey games.
Listen to the hockey games. Now, let me see. I was at the gym the other day, and here comes a Bronco star of old, Lucas de Benedit.
Okay.
Lucas de Benedit has been spent the last hockey season playing in France.
Huh?
And if you're going to play in France, where are you going to play? You play in Paris. And so he spent the whole 23 games in Paris and living around the area. Mom and Dad went over and visited him, and Paris is a pretty good time, even during bad times. Well, he scored 30 goals in that 23 games.
Nice.
And and I asked him, and I will bring him up a little bit more. In fact, somewhere along the line, we could even have him as a guest, because he likes to gab, and it's good to ask young people questions. But is he going back? Well, he says no. They're doing some contacts with the same league in Marseille, which is on the Mediterranean side in southern France, which is. It's some of these old ancient cities are so incredibly beautiful, and if you can get a chance to go spend any time with those like Lucas is doing, what a way to augment an education.
Absolutely.
And one other story I want to tell you: when he was a little kid, he was sophomore or junior at the high school level, he scored a hat trick. He scored a hat trick short-handed. 3 goals short-handed. You know I was going to bring that up. Were you there when he did?
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
When as soon as you said Lucas de Benedit, I'm like, short-handed hat trick. You don't see those every day.
You don't see him ever.
No,
and I said to his dad check in on that. I says, I have never seen a hat trick scored short-handed, and I've never even heard of it.
Yeah.
Being short-handed. So anyway, it was really good to see Lucas again. He can scoot and shoot and score, and those hockey players are really fun to watch. Every time I watch the Broncos play out there. I keep on thinking about Lucas. We don't have many scooter and shooters anymore, and he was a good one. He wasn't. He was limited in size, but he was never limited on what he could do. So
on the excitement level, it was always top notch.
Every time he touched the puck, you didn't know what was going to happen, and I know that
every time the other team touched the puck, you didn't know what was going to happen because he's going to come pick your pocket.
He's going to steal everything from you. He could really skate, and he could really use the stick. He had great hands, and I know that Father Mike and Mother Susie, they're glad to have him back, but
I'm sure.
He's looking real good. And
yeah,
he was fun. Now, let me see, what else do I have? The effects of the disease is like 349 million was waged in the NCAA last tournament. 85% of the NCAA annual budget comes from revenues of this tournament. What else can I say?
You always bring up Zion Williamson during our show. Did you hear what he pledged to do the other day?
He's going to pick up the whole thing and
he's going to for 30 days. He's going to pay the wages for the workers at his arena in New Orleans.
Kevin Love is doing the same.
Put $100,000 out, and I see that a whole bunch of the other players have joined in to try to take care of their people at their arenas, which is
there's an interdependency that maybe you can only see when you're filthy rich. But these guys make a lot of money, but their career is short, and it's just and they also see these people all the time. They know who they are. They know who their wives are, who their children are. They're all educated people for the most part. I think that the NBA is going to handle this. I feel real good for the NBA.
Yeah, they did. Like I said, Zion and Kevin got it actually started. He was the first one, and then Zion and a bunch of others came out and did the same thing. So yeah, pretty good stuff.
And the final thing is, what to do during this that I have, and this is what I told you earlier. Yeah. All the movies, and so you can see League of Their Own.
It was on this morning. I watched part of that.
Okay. And I kind of laughed and giggled because Horse Feathers, 1932, a movie about college football scandal, starring the Marx Brothers, and it goes through and you watch this and I swear I have a copy of this. I have all of the Marx Brothers films, but when you see Chico playing the quarterback and he comes across and he says uno, duo, tre. Bendy, this time left Endy, and it's just like there he goes, and he's laughing this all up in an Italian accent because he was not anything but Italian.
Sure.
And I'm thinking, they're right. We will work our way through this. We're not going to like it. It's going to be painful, but this time left Endy. We'll get through this.
We'll be all right.
Yeah.
Local note here, yesterday, head coach of the boys basketball team, Bronco boys basketball team, Amos McKenzie, put in his letter of resignation. So I say thanks to Amos, and I say, holy cow, that's 4 boys sports that have had their head coach resign. Basically, I say resign. George McDonald retiring from teaching, so he announced at the banquet on Monday night that yes, he is officially done as head hockey coach for the boys. So that means baseball with Eric Walls, and now boys basketball, Amos McKenzie, George McDonald, and of course John Fromke with football submitting his letter back in January. That's 4 head coaches basically in the last 2 months. That are going to go the opposite way, and so you look.
That's very disconcerting. It really is.
It is, and I really believe that Seth Edisted was hired the other day, pending school board approval on Monday, as the new head coach. Very, very good choice. Phil Talmadge is going to be taking over for Eric Walsh. Very, very good choice. Who's going to take over for the boys basketball program? John Reller, I know, should be considered a top flight candidate. He's been there with Amos for the last couple of years. He is dedicated to it. He is involved with it, and I'm not saying he's the only person out there that could do the job, but I think John will throw his name into his hat into the ring and see what. But there's some concern out there, and I talked with head track and field coach for the boys and cross country coach this morning at the hockey tournament, and Mr. Jelly said, even though I'm retiring, I think I'd like to stay in coaching with the kids. I'd like to stay working with the kids. And I said, well, that's a relief because coaching change occurs. It happens, and people make their decisions. You know that.
Yeah.
I know that. We've both been coaches and have said we're going to make our move to the next level, to the next thing, and it's a choice that's not taken lightly. And you got to respect everything that these guys have put into the program.
I tell you what, I got to thank Amos because people don't know what it's like to put it all on the line every Friday or a couple of times a week. That is your heart and soul for that season, and those kids are everything to you. And how they succeed or fail weighs on you. There's no two ways about it. It goes a ways eventually, but it's a tough thing to do.
It's become a 365 thing. You better have your kids playing during the summer. Yeah. You better be going to coaches clinics. You better be it's everything. And so again, Amos had 3 years at the helm, and we'll see what the change brings. And I suppose in that respect, we're going to have to talk about change because I don't know if there's really much for us to talk about for the next few weeks until we get something to talk about. So are we going on hiatus as well? Because we didn't discuss this before we started the show, so we might as well talk about it with you while we're because it seems to me without sports to talk about, it's tough to have the sports wrap because
it is.
It's very difficult, and with I know the boys and girls Bronco track and field teams were supposed to have their first meet coming up in about 10 days. That's been canceled, of course, the indoor meets at Bemidji, and of course everything has to be done until April 6th. For high school sports, for sure, no interscholastic, no with other teams. You can practice, but you can't be with other schools. So April 6th is the number there. The Big Ten schools, same thing. Everything off until April 6th. And when everybody's postponed everything for the next tennis 6 weeks. NBA at least 30 days. MLS baseball at least 2 weeks. My gosh, they somehow they got the Masters to say, we're going to shut down the Masters as well. That kind of surprised me because one thing the Masters they don't do what everybody else tells them to do.
No, they do not.
They're going to do it their way, and so.
No, they're right now. I'm not sure. I mean, they don't even have Formula One car driving, and I don't follow that close. But it's kind of like the end of the basketball season when you're waiting for baseball to start all up, and there's nothing to do but read books. I guess I can only watch Horse Feathers once tonight, and that'll probably do it. But I'm going to listen to music, and I've been listening to music the other night. Skeletons from the Closet, the Grateful Dead.
Ooh.
Sue was up there, and I started playing 1974 album, very nice and clean, and I'm playing. I haven't heard this one in a long time. No, maybe about 25 years. But so we have things around to occupy our time and to even improve our minds. What we don't have is we don't have sports, and that bothers me as much as anybody else.
Final plug, Bronco Athletic Hall of Fame will be on April 18th. It seems I won't get to plug it going forward, sounds like. I'll say it now. I will say this, everybody. Right now we're at over 200 tickets spoken for already. The capacity of the room is about 275. So if you want a ticket, you might want to contact me. If you watch the show, you might want to tell people where we're at. We still have inductees that haven't ordered their tickets yet. So I'm getting nervous. So we're gonna have a full house, but you may want to speak up.
Well, and as long as you bring that up, I talked to Dick Ostrud today, a Hall of Famer. He says, "Tell Timmy I'm coming."
Okay.
So,
make sure you put a ticket down for Dick Ostrud. Don't forget about that.
Yeah.
All these Hall of Famers want to come back and congratulate these other Hall of Famers. And again, just in case you're unaware of who's going in, it'll be Bob Bateman, who graduated in 58, 59 from.
Ostrud knew him in high school.
Only Bronco ever to play Division I basketball. Dick LePage, who was basically kind of right in the infancy of Bronco hockey. And was a very, very good football player who lives up in Winnipeg now. Jeannie Korn, Blaze, at the time when she was in high school, she'll be going in. And also Ronnie Beck, who was the member of the 64, 65, 66 hockey team.
Never lost a game.
And never lost a game in goal, so pretty good people there. And then the 1957 hockey team going in as well. Jim Worley, amongst others, obviously there. So we'll have a good crowd there. So if you're interested in that, please come out and help us induct these people, these great Broncos, into the Athletic Hall of Fame. George, it's been fun. Like I said, we'll take a couple weeks off, and when things start to ramp up again, we'll come back and give them heck.
Just a shout out for my boys down in Chaska. And I'll tell you what, we are actually being watched all around this country. Boston, Mexico, Portland, we're all around, and it's just like we have a following.
Yeah, so all those.
Thank you for following.
All the shows are on YouTube, so if you miss us, and I don't know why you would, but if you do, you got all those shows.
Yeah, every week they're there.
Thanks, everybody.